through democratic elections. Ukraine's president is of Jewish extraction. The Russians haven't provided any proof for these claims. Basically, they were trying to delegitimize Ukraine's leadership, basically say, roll over, take our terms, anything else, it'll be war. So given that extraordinarily aggressive negotiating position, it's very hard to see where a deal can be struck. But I think for now, it's about showing the outside world that Ukraine is willing to talk, even though these conflict and the shooting goes on. Whether it actually achieves anything, I think, is questionable.
That's Nick Connolly there in Ukraine. Many, many thanks, Nick. A turning point in the history of our continent. That's how Chancellor Olaf Scholz described Russia's war against Ukraine. Speaking to a special session of Parliament, the German leader announced a raft of policy changes that would have been unthinkable just days ago. Germany will drastically strengthen its military and move quickly to eliminate its reliance on Russian energy exports. He put the blame squarely on Russian President Vladimir Putin, who he said had brought decades of peaceful coexistence to an end. The German Chancellor earlier today.
Putin will ein russisches Imperium errichten.
Putin wants to create a Russian empire. He wants to reconfigure Europe according to his own ideas, and he does not hesitate to use military violence. We see this today in Ukraine. So we must ask ourselves what capabilities Putin's Russia has, and what capabilities do we need to meet this threat today and in the future.
Heute und in der Zukunft. Wir müssen deutlich mehr
We
investieren.
must invest more in the security of our country to defend our freedom and democracy.
Zu schützen. Wir werden von nun
From now on, year for year, more than 2% of our GDP will be invested in defense.
I'm joined now by our chief political editor, Michaela Kufner. Michaela, I think it's probably safe to say that this was a historic moment for German foreign and defense policy.
Absolutely. This is a paradigm shift in German defense policy. Frankly, we've seen more change in that in the past 24 hours than in the previous 24 years. That is now safe to say. It started when Saturday evening we got news.
Russian forces are closing in on Ukraine's capital, as sources say. Officials in the U.S. fear that Kiev could fall to Russia within days. Ukrainian forces successfully pushing the Russians back over the river in the southern port city of Kherson, and that is where CNN's Nick Paton-Walsh is joining us from now. Tell us what you've been seeing, Nick.
Brianna, just to let you know, as we're sort of beginning to get towards sundown here, we've had this consistent shelling continuing over the area where we were earlier on, the bridge, which is essentially across the Dnieper River that splits Ukraine from the Russian bordering side to the European bordering side. Deeply symbolic, but also here a place of great violence. The most serious fighting in the country, the president of Ukraine said yesterday, and where the Russians seem to have got over the bridge yesterday. Today it was clear when we went to the scene, they'd been pushed back.
Well, this is where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said some of the fiercest fighting was yesterday. A key bridge on the outskirts of Kherson, essentially the route up into main Ukraine from the Russian-held peninsula of Crimea, taken in 2014. And you can see around me, there's been quite significant destruction here over the past 48 hours. That building clearly took a direct hit, presumably from some of the airstrikes we've been hearing. And this town, it's fair to say, is terrified. They turned their lights off last night. We saw hotels plunging themselves into darkness, children asking what's happening, low-flying aircraft coming in, and the distant boom of airstrikes, intermittent small arms fire as well. I was told of dead bodies brought out from here. We've seen one man unfortunately left just in the middle of the road there. But the damage is pretty significant here, and we keep walking up towards this petrol station. You see the sort of bizarre local landmarks that end up being the focus of fighting, and it's clear the Ukrainian army made a significant stand here and took quite a lot of certainly damage to their vehicles, possibly military as well. Well, things seem to have been left off and where the Ukrainian forces' last positions were. They are a little bit further away from here. We don't give specifics when we're around them, but clearly there's been impact of shells nearby. That, I think, is part of the military guy's t-shirt, and still some artillery shells lying on the side here, unused. This petrol station, it seems, has also taken a significant hit. That van's been turned over And one thing we're mindful of is a gas tank that seems to be slowly burning on that direction. What's extraordinary to see here is how fast civilian life returns back to this area. That's desperation. That's not people thinking it's safe. They're trying to get over to see people they care about, do what they need to do each day. But the contrast with that and the sheer kind of firepower that we're seeing used here, this must surely have been some kind of airstrike. I mean, the impact looks like it may have come from the Ukrainian side. But these tanks disabled, and all around us a sign of quite what Ukraine's government mean by the fighting having been most intense around here.
So I'm just going to pause here. The sirens have picked up again, closer, frankly, to the city centre. And that comes while you were seeing that report from this morning. A very loud rumbling explosion in the distance over here, and then the sound of a jet in the skies. That is most likely Russian air power. And it would suggest that, as we saw last night, as the sun begins to set, that they are looking to make another move on that vital bridge. It is deeply symbolic and strategically important, frankly, that they have access to that. It lets their forces from Crimea head north up towards the capital of Kiev. And the residents of this town, with the Ukrainian flag blowing right in front of me, are deeply concerned about whether part of the Russian plan involves coming in to here where their families shelter.
Or are you taking us to that bridge that is so important, as you say, Nick Payton-Walsh in Kherson, Ukraine, for us? Thanks.
Welcome to Daily Brief YouTube channel. On the second day of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, new developments are happening every moment. The Russian army has put Kiev at the focal point of its target. According to the Ukrainian president's statement, Russian troops continue to advance from the north and east of Kiev. According to the Ukrainian army's statement,
It's a sunny morning in Ukraine. The temperature is -5 degrees, but politics continues to heat up. Will this conflict escalate into war? Will Europe be pushed into a third world war? Or will diplomacy deliver? We're in Kiev, tracking the biggest flashpoint in the world and bringing you ground reports. Hello and welcome to Gravitas Ukraine Direct. We're coming to you live from Kiev. The local time is 5:30 p.m. The temperature here is -5 degrees Celsius. My fingers and my brain and pretty much everything else is freezing, so bear with me. There is also a forecast of war clouds over Ukraine. More than 125,000 Russian troops are camping not too far away from where we are standing. We are in the capital city of Ukraine, and this is within striking distance of where the Russian troops are stationed in Belarus. It's been a very busy 24 hours here, so I'll begin this broadcast by walking you through the latest developments. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan today. The meeting took place here in Kiev. Erdogan offered to host a Ukraine-Russia summit. Now, this was not his first mediation offer. The last one clearly did not convert. So will this time be any different? We don't know yet. Another very significant meeting took place today. This was some 6,500 kilometers from where I'm standing. The location was Beijing, and the meeting was between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping. How do you think it went? I'll give you a brief summary. The Putin-Xi meeting was as much about signaling as it was about drawing a strategy. Did the two talk about the ongoing Ukraine crisis? Of course they did. The details have been kept confidential.
Celebrating the war? This video purports to show Russian soldiers dancing before heading to the front line in Ukraine. The video is circulating on several platforms and has been viewed thousands of times. But the video isn't from Ukraine. It dates from 2018 and shows a Uzbekistan military band at
the reality of a European capital city being bombed by Russia as the war in Ukraine rages is still hard to fathom. The situation is getting more dire by the hour as the Russian military news surrounding most of Ukraine tightens. But Ukrainians are literally fighting in the streets to defend the key cities of Kyiv and Kharkiv. If there's any good news, it's the overwhelming international show of support for Ukraine and President Volodymyr Zelensky. In the past 24 hours, the U.S. and allies ratcheted up financial pressure on Putin with massive sanctions. And in return for those tougher sanctions, Putin has put his nuclear deterrence forces on high alert. CBS's David Martin is here for more on that, but first we begin with Charlie D'Agata in Kyiv. Charlie?
Good morning, Margaret. The Ukrainian president has accused Russia of intentionally targeting civilian areas in another night of artillery and airstrikes here in the capital. But Russian troops have run into fierce resistance as Ukrainian forces hold ground, and no major city has been captured. The Russian military expanded its aerial onslaught overnight, taking aim at oil and gas facilities in a wave of attacks. In Ukraine's second city of Kharkiv, street battles are underway as Ukrainian soldiers and civilians struggle to keep control of the city. In Kyiv, a missile tears through an apartment block, where we found dazed and displaced residents dragging belongings away. This is some of the debris and rubble that rained down from this apartment block after a missile strike. The Russian military says this is not one of ours, instead blaming Ukrainian air defenses for going off target. Many have sought shelter deep underground in the city's subway network. Angelina moved here from Crimea after the Russian military invaded there in 2014.
You don't know what to do. You're just scared and that's all. But now I know what to do.
The government has called on men 18 to 60 to step up and fight, handing out around 18,000 weapons. They don't want us revealing this location because they don't want it to be a target for the Russian military. But we have seen a steady stream of volunteers. The commander told us it's not hundreds, but thousands, very few with any military experience, every single one of them ready to fight. Ukraine's soldiers and reservists now man checkpoints in the city streets on the hunt for plainclothes Russian saboteurs trying to infiltrate the capital. Now, explosions have continued overnight and really throughout the day here. To give you an idea of how tense it is, the mayor has ordered everyone off the streets until at least tomorrow at 8 a.m., saying anyone caught outside will be considered an enemy. Margaret?
Charlie D'Agata, stay safe.
Chenengo, who is in the outskirts of Kyiv. And Richard, clearly the story is this Ukrainian resistance and Russia's inability to, I think, to have a quick invasion.
Кто, какая часть, зачем пришел?
25-я бригада, войсковая часть 75, 242, 75, 242, войсковая часть, 25-я бригада.
Зачем прибыл? С какой целью? Кто послал?
Прибыли мы на учение. Нас тут обманули маленько. Ну, так он оказалось, что теперь я здесь.
Та же часть изначально говорили, что прибыли на учение. В итоге, когда уже закинули на передовую, люди все были деморализованы и никто не хотел идти. Но сказали, будете врагами народа. А так это военное время, то вообще можете быть расстрелянными. И нас стали закидывать как пушечное мясо. Хотя люди, все, по крайней мере, нашей части этой войны, но не хотят. Просто хотят домой, просто хотят мира.
Александр, 25-я бригада, та же часть, водитель, посадили, сказали, учение, все там нормально, все как будет. Ну, мы не знали, что пока мы ничего не хотели.
просто обманули, бросили. Та же часть. Номер части повторяемо. Сейчас я не помню. Недавно сразу. Резервист? Резервист, да? По резерву, да? Ничего. Зачем?
Soldiers are near Kiev tonight, where Russian paratroopers are on the move. On one hand, they're very proud to be defending their country, but on the other, they also know they're massively outgunned.
We are in the position right now, expecting the assault.
Serge Velenchensky is one of the thousands of Ukrainian citizens being called up to war. He's protecting infrastructure in the capital city.
We are on alert all the time. We are motivated. We will fight. We will resist.
The question, though, is for how long? Russian troops are bearing down on Kyiv and bringing with them tremendous firepower, anticipating an easy victory.
But we all bought machine guns and weapons and cartridges. No one is afraid. No one will abandon their homes. No one will flee.
We are preparing to be engaged soon.
Lieutenant Denis Antipov's airborne unit got the call to duty just yesterday. He believes that Ukrainian forces can do well on the ground.
We need strong air support. We need anti-aircraft launch pads. We need anti-aircraft missiles.
They also need protective gear for the scores of volunteer citizens who've been handed an AK-47 and some ammunition, but little else.
We need equipment because even though our spirit is high, we are ready to fight. We are ready to protect our country.
But Russian planes and helicopters control the skies. So Ukraine now is asking NATO allies to lend a hand there.
For basically to close down the airspace over Ukraine because they outnumber us. And we can't hold out for a long time because it's basically a game of numbers.
And those numbers right now are with Russia, which has committed only about a third of its well-trained soldiers to the fight.
So Ukrainians will like what GOP Representative Adam Kinzinger of Illinois is pushing tonight. He wants the U.S. and NATO to enforce a no-fly zone over Ukraine, which in his words would make it more of a fair fight. From the News Center, I'm Rick Chambers. Chair, back to you.
Our coverage in Washington with Caroline Shively. Caroline, can you give us the latest on what we're hearing from the ground in Ukraine and reports about street fighting?
Absolutely, Alex and Christine. Kyiv officials sending out a warning to residents to avoid going near windows or on balconies to take precautions against being hit by debris or bullets. Throughout the night, Russian troops have moved to encircle Kyiv after pounding that city and several others from the skies. Our crew on the ground in Kyiv witnessing the explosions from missile strikes to small arms fire. Although their latest word is they aren't hearing those larger explosions at this hour, just the smaller weapons being fired. But things are changing minute by minute. As many as 18,000 rifles have been handed out to civilians to protect their homes and families. Grandmothers and teenagers taking up arms with minimal training. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urging citizens to stand firm against the siege, declaring the fight is here and the fate of Ukraine is being decided right now. Ukraine's military reports that it has shot down 2 Russian transport planes, one 50 miles south of Kyiv, another 25 miles south. Each plane can hold up to 125 people. Our Lucas Tomlinson urges caution on those reports. So far, we can't confirm those. We can say hundreds of casualties have been reported from Russian soldiers, the Ukrainian military, as well as civilians. Late tonight, here at home, President Biden authorized another $350 million to provide immediate military assistance to Ukraine. Alex and Christine, back to you.
All right, Caroline, thank you so much for that perspective. Of course, we are seeing those shots and hearing about people that are hiding in subways to stay safe. Caroline, we thank you for your perspective.
According to Ukrainian armed forces, Russia was not able to overtake the city of Kyiv tonight. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said tonight hundreds of Russian soldiers have lost their lives while at the same time losing soldiers of their own. Throughout the early hours in Ukraine, the fight was in the streets. Take a listen. this video showing the exchange of gunfire breaking out in Ukraine's largest city. The battle lasting throughout the night, but the city does remain in Ukraine control. In a new video, Zelensky looks to dispel rumors of the opposite.
Всім доброго ранку, українці.
New tonight, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky vowing to stay in the capital city of Kyiv as Russian troops draw near. Posting this video an hour ago from central Kyiv, the president says, "There's a lot of fake information online that I call on our army to lay down arms, and that there's an evacuation." On Thursday, Zelensky warned he and his family were Putin's top two targets as his counterpart looks to topple the government.
Це будемо захищати.
I'm here. We won't lay down our arms. We will defend our state.
He's made clear that he's still in Ukraine, proudly and courageously standing up in the face of the Russian attack.
Sirens sound as explosions are heard moving closer and closer to the country's largest city. Ukraine continues its fight with Russia, defending their homeland.
Ukraine. Знищити Україну політично, знищивши главу держави. За наявною у нас інформацією, ворог позначив мене як ціль номер 1, мою родину як ціль номер 2. Всі ми тут, наші військові тут, громадяни суспільства тут, всі ми тут. Захищаємо нашу незалежність, нашу державу. Так буде далі.
Сломались, пацаны. Сломались. Можно оттащить на Россию обратно. А вы хоть знаете, куда вы едете? Куда? На Киев, блядь, хуярите. Да. Ну, у вас пока все на нашей стороне. Ваши плен сдаются хорошо. Потому что тоже пацаны не знают, куда едут, ехать. Блядь. И я вот всю колонну пообспрашивал, таких как вы, никто не в курсе вообще, кто куда едет.
Winter's here. Plan ahead and you could be riding a new sled. Live smarter at fsource.org.
begin with first hopes of a breakthrough over the war in Ukraine. President Vladimir Zelensky's office says it will hold talks with Russian officials at the border with Belarus. Russia says its delegation has flown in for the talks. It's not clear when negotiations might begin. In other developments, President Vladimir Putin has put Russia's nuclear forces on alert in an escalation of tensions with the West. The U.S. has accused him of manufacturing threats. Fighting continues on the ground in Ukraine. Russian forces have attacked fuel depots, and there are reports of explosions outside the capital, Kyiv. The mayor says there are no Russian troops in the city. Battles are still going on around other population centers. For more, let's bring in DW correspondent Nick Connolly, who is in Vinnytskaya in western Ukraine. Nick, why has President Zelensky agreed to talk with Russia now?
I think it's really important also for the Ukraine's diplomatic efforts, even if this doesn't reach any results, just to show that Ukraine is open to negotiation, is open to a deal. I think it's all a question of on what terms are those deals struck, and also even on what terms are those talks held. So the Russian side today arrived in the Belarusian provincial city of Gomel, which is just near the Ukrainian border. It's in a region from which attacks are still being launched on Kiev every day, and they were expecting Ukrainians to cross the border into a country, Belarus, which is basically supporting this Russian military effort with supplies, with access to its bases. And the Ukrainians it was expected by the Russians would just arrive to sign some kind of capitulation and give in to all Russia's demands. That was also something the Ukrainians weren't going to agree to. So I think this was an attempt by the Russians to kind of show the world, look, the Ukrainians just aren't interested in constructive dialogue. That's why we have to fight this war, because they're not turning up for these talks we're offering them. So Volodymyr Zelensky trying to show the rest of the world that Ukraine deserves support, that it is trying to find a solution, but it's not going to be dictated to from Moscow how these talks happen and where they happen. I think it's just pretty extraordinary to imagine, going for talks in a country that is helping another country to attack you.
Regardless of how the...
I'm going to jump in there because Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, is speaking.
The proposal in a few minutes. At the same time, we're strengthening once more our sanctions against the Kremlin and its collaborator, Lukashenko's regime. First, we are shutting down the EU airspace for Russians. We're proposing a prohibition on all Russian-owned, Russian-registered and Russian-controlled aircraft. These aircraft will no more be able to land in, take off, or overfly the territory of the European Union. This will apply to any plane, owned, chartered, or otherwise controlled by a Russian legal or natural person. So let me be very clear. Our airspace will be closed to every Russian plane, and that includes the private jets of oligarchs too. Second, in another unprecedented step, we will ban in the European Union the Kremlin's media machine. The state-owned Russia Today and Sputnik, as well as their subsidiaries, will no longer be able to spread their lies to justify Putin's war and to sow division in our union. So we are developing tools to ban that toxic and harmful disinformation in Europe. And third, we will target the other aggressor of this war, Lukashenko's regime. Lukashenko's regime is complicit in the vicious attack against Ukraine. So we will hit Lukashenko's regime with a new package of sanctions. We will introduce restrictive measures against their most important sectors. This will stop their exports of products from mineral fuels to tobacco, wood and timber, cement, iron and steel. We will also extend to Belarus the export restrictions we introduced on dual-use goods for Russia. This will also avoid any risk of circumvention of our measures against Russia. And in addition, we will sanction those Belarusians helping the Russian war effort. All these measures come on top of the strong package that I presented to you last night, agreed by our international partners. Under this package, important Russian banks will be excluded from the SWIFT system. We will also ban the transactions of Russia's central bank and freeze all its assets to prevent it from financing Putin's war. And we will target the assets of Russian oligarchs. We continue to coordinate closely with partners around the globe, and we remain in close contact with our Ukrainian friends. President Zelensky's leadership and his bravery and the resilience of the Ukrainian people are outstanding and impressive. They are an inspiration for all of us. We welcome with open arms those Ukrainians who have to flee from Putin's bombs, and I'm proud of the warm welcome that Europeans have given them. We are mobilizing every effort and every euro to support our eastern member states to host and take care of these refugees. We will do this in full solidarity.
We just found the location of the Russian column that came into town this morning. Lined between Tiger, lightly armoured vehicles. They seem to be destroyed by the Ukrainians. Ukrainian soldiers told this position. And talking to some locals, they said the Russians dismounted and dispersed into this residential area. They think that Ukrainians are currently trying to hunt down the survivors. The message from the Ukrainian side is those columns were destroyed, Russian infantry found out, and there's a kind of mopping up operation going on. The streets are empty. There is an order from the authorities for everybody to stay inside. Just trying to work out what's going on, but what seems clear is that Kharkiv is still in Ukrainian hands. If that was an attempt to grab the city, it seems to have failed. To be honest, it doesn't sound like it was. I don't really understand what it was.
Begin with senior foreign correspondent Ian Paddle in Kyiv. Good morning, Ian.
Yeah, good morning, George. We're in Maidan Square. This country, this city, is now on a total war footing. We've been hearing the sounds of battle here, but attention's been focused on the country's second largest city, where it appears that an attempt by Russian...
Smoke billows over the Kiev skyline as the Russian forces draw closer to Ukraine's capital, but their main effort still hasn't been launched. There is a continuing curfew here until Monday at least. The only people on the streets are Ukrainian security forces, now hunting down Russian saboteurs. Sky News filmed as men in plain clothes, supported by soldiers, arrested two men in a black SUV. We don't know why they were targeted, but it illustrates the tension here. The men were held at gunpoint and questioned. In recent days, rumours have wildly circulated of roving Russian agents attempting to bring terror to the streets and plotting a route into Kiev for the Russian tanks. The city's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, says it's exactly why the curfew was introduced.
The Russians sent some troops, small troops, which actually with some time, we as civilian, with the weapons, snipers, and shootings everywhere, and they want to make terror attack and to bring the panic to our city. It's a goal. It's a goal. We hunting of them, and we take this some people, Russians, who are coming to our city.
So everyone is indoors and quite often underground these days. The shelling is particularly bad at night. Now, making Molotov cocktails and it's spread to Kiev. Ukrainian Ministry of Defense has issued instructions on how to put them together. Others have been signing up to fight in their droves.
Now, in an attempt to counter Russian troops in Ukraine, US President Joe Biden has now signed an order to provide $350 million in military aid to Kyiv. The development comes as Russian forces continue to march forward to siege the Ukrainian capital and overthrow Zelensky's government. The aid will also include Javelin anti-tank weapons. This is the third time that Biden has used his presidential authority to send emergency security assistance from US stockpiles to Ukraine. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, meanwhile, has said that his country will provide lethal aid to Ukraine through NATO partners to support its troops in this fight against the Russian military.
We are already providing significant support in terms of non-lethal aid, but I've just spoken with the Defence Minister and we'll be seeking to provide whatever support we can for lethal aid through our NATO partners, particularly the United States and the United Kingdom, and we'll be working through those channels because that's the most effective way to do it. They are already providing support in these areas and we will be assisting them with what they are doing.
Other countries, including Germany, have also announced decision to provide military assistance to Kyiv, while France has pledged to send more military equipment as well as fuel to Ukraine to help fight off the Russian invasion. Our next report gets you all the details. Take a look.
President Joe Biden on Friday instructed the U.S. State Department to release up to an additional $350 million worth of weapons from U.S. stocks to Ukraine, as the country struggles to push back a Russian invasion. In a memorandum to Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Biden directed that $350 million allocated through the Foreign Assistance Act be designated for Ukraine's defense. This marks the third time that the United States has drawn from its weapons to supply Ukraine, after doing so in the fall of 2021 and then again in December. Blinken on Saturday called the third authorization unprecedented. Over the past year, the United States has committed more than $1 billion to security assistance to Ukraine, Blinken said. Ukraine has been asking for Javelin anti-tank weapons and Stinger missiles to shoot down aircraft. Other nations have pledged military material to Kyiv, as Ukraine's military fights against an invading Russian force. The Netherlands will supply 200 Stinger air defense rockets, while Belgium has pledged 2,000 machine guns and 3,800 tons of fuel. France has decided to send defensive military equipment, while adding that the issue of sending offensive arms was still under consideration.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.
It's always been about craft for us.
We can talk about Russian position right now. This the war, back and forth. That many people died. It's many civilian people died. It's horrible, especially for civilian women, children, our soldier. And Russians explain they came to change the government because the government is bad. I'm sorry, every Ukrainian support the decision to be the part of European family is a main priority for us. And Putin not agree with that. We don't want to live in Russian empire. It's the main reason why is Russian soldiers coming here. Every Ukrainian support this war. This war against the Russians, because we are not aggressive wars to anyone. But if some army come to us, we will be fight. We fight for our independence, for our family, for our future, for our values. It's main point.
Can you give me a sense of how far away the Russians are now from the center? The
Russians army stay in the port of Kyiv, and it's not so far. It's from here, I guess, it's 20 kilometers, maybe less.
And how prepared is Kiev to deal with invasion of Russian troops?
Actually, it's what did Russians? They destroyed the economy of our country. I expect right now a huge humanitarian catastrophe in our country. Huge humanitarian catastrophe because our economy destroyed, our infrastructure is destroyed. The people doesn't have a job, people doesn't have money, people doesn't have homes right now. Millions of people move from his houses, and what they do it, they destroy the country. And one point, the life of the millions of the people for our independence already paid 1,000 Ukrainians with his huge price, his life. But what is the next? What is the next? Russians have just expectation of rebuild empire. We don't want to Russian empire. We want to fight for our independence. Is the main message.
Just told that the head of the Russian delegation is waiting for a Ukrainian delegation to come to Gorman. Can you confirm this?
I have information.
I'm able to comment on this?
I have information, but I'm not involved to make a negotiation. Which negotiation?
It's
no. The question: which negotiations is one priority? Move away from our country.
But you can't comment on whether a Ukrainian delegation is coming to Gorman right now?
No.
Are you able to comment on what the fighting has been like within Kiev? Because for us reporting on it, it's been really hard to follow and to know exactly what's going on. Sometimes there's reports of shooting in Podil and then on the outskirts of Kiev. Can you give us a sense of what's been happening?
The Russians sent some troops, small troops, which actually with some time as civilian, with weapons, snipers, and shootings away, and they want to make terror attack and to bring the panic to our city. It's a goal. It's a goal. We hunting of them, and we take this some people, Russians, who are coming to our city.
And how, yesterday there were reports that the Ukrainian forces were seeking out these Russians within Kiev. How successful has that operation been?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your question exactly.
So yesterday there were reports that the Ukrainian forces were looking for groups of separate Russian forces within the city. How successful has that operation been?
It's a group make intervention.
Right.
Yeah, it's some successful, but they hunting, they see some way snipers right now. We make right now announcement. Nobody allowed to go from houses. First of all, we care about the life of the people from one point, from another point. We try to hunting these people. It will be much more easy if nobody in the street.
Okay, so but you can't comment on how successful it was last night. Were you able to find these groups? What exactly happened last night?
We killed.
A team of snipers is moving into position on the front line in eastern Ukraine. This video was released by the Ukrainian military, which said it was further proof of direct Russian military involvement in the conflict in the Donbass. An official statement said these men were members of Russia's Federal Security Service, who filmed themselves in February 2020. The Ukrainian military did not say how it obtained the video.
A lot of
FSB stuff. So it's body armor, the service pistol that they are issued, the sniper rifle, they are issued, the camouflage, the gear for taking weather data. It's all FSB.
Russia has always claimed that separatist fighters in eastern Ukraine are simply volunteers. But these men have the latest sophisticated equipment. One item is a radio-electronic warfare kit, which is rarely seen in the Donbass.
Інструмент радіопригнічення, так? Тобто
это пиздец. Машину. Просто переехал машину вчера.
Ёб твою мать.
Минский массив.
В той стороне оболонь, на которой постоянно слышны звуки.
Russia is ramping up its invasion of Ukraine, now in its second day. Ukraine says its forces are battling Russian troops on the edge of the...
Russia's invasion into Ukraine has divided the world. The United States and its allies in the West have tried to project a united front against Russian aggression, but Russia too has mustered its allies. So let's take a look at who has backed the war and who has condemned it in unequivocal terms and who has remained neutral during Europe's worst crisis since the World War II. Let's start with the US. Sponsored draft resolution at the UNSC. The draft sought to deplore in the strongest terms Russia's aggression against Ukraine. The draft resolution was bound to fail. Russia
At Avocado, we believe what's better for you is better for the planet.
Some disturbing images. Russia sending in these so-called heavy flamethrowers that are capable of shooting thermobaric rockets. Tell us about that. Our viewers, some of our viewers may not be aware of what that even is.
Yeah, that's an observation.
This morning, Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered Russia's nuclear deterrent forces on high alert. That is in response to economic sanctions from the West.
Another major development in this conflict, the office of Ukraine's president says a Ukrainian delegation will meet with Russian officials at as Moscow's troops draw closer to Kyiv. Ukrainian troops continue to defend the capital city overnight. The UN estimates 368,000 refugees have now fled the country.
And as we mentioned, Putin's latest move comes as the United States and European partners put economic pressure on Russia for its unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. ABC's Mary Alice Parks explains.
This morning, the U.S. and European partners looking to make the Kremlin pay a stiff price for its invasion on Ukraine, announcing another round of severe financial punishments designed to further sever ties between Russian banks and the rest of the world.
So at this point, we're talking about the most maximal time.
Сьогодні був тяжкий, але сміливий день. Ми боремося за свою державу абсолютно на всіх фронтах. На півдні, сході, півночі, у багатьох містах нашої прекрасної країни. Боремося цілодобово і на дипломатичному фронті. Маю сказати абсолютно відверто, ця ніч буде більш тяжкою, ніж день. Під ударом багато міст нашої держави. Чернігів, Суми, Харків, наші хлопці, наші дівчата на Донбасі, міста півдня України, особлива увага Києву. Не можна втратити столицю. На всіх фронтах цієї ночі ворог застосує усі наявні у них сили, щоб зламати наш опір. Підло, жорстко і не по-людськи. Цієї ночі вони підуть на штурм. Всі ми маємо розуміти, що нас чекає. Цієї ночі маємо вистояти. Доля України вирішується саме зараз. Просто немає і не може бути такої правди, яка б могла би пояснити, чому обстрілюють з реактивної артилерії дитячі садочки та житлову інфраструктуру. У Ворзелі Київської області били градами по дитячому будинку. По Охтирці, Сумська область, били ураганами. Під обстрілом були житлові квартали, укриття, дитячі садочки. Що це за війна проти українських дітей в дитячому садку? Хто вони? Вони теж неонацисти з дитячого садочку. Або це солдати НАТО, які загрожували Росії.
All right, we've been covering some breaking news that has just developed. President Vladimir Putin of Russia has put his nuclear deterrent forces on high alert. Now, the U.S., as you know, maintains with Russia a balance of power of nuclear missiles that would mutually assure the destruction of either one if one of them were to launch it. This is interesting because a few moments ago I was telling you about the SWIFT system and removing Russia from the SWIFT system. One of the reasons it hasn't been used is because it would be such a strong sanction that people have referred to it as the nuclear option. Except that it's not. It doesn't have any nuclear weapons associated with it. It's just that serious. It does seem that under pressure, Vladimir Putin is considering the idea that his nuclear option is worth reminding the world about in the face of growing sanctions and opposition to the invasion of Ukraine. Joining me now is Ruth Ben-Ghiat. She's a professor of history at New York University. She's the author of the book Strong Men, Mussolini to the Present. Professor, this is brand new news. There have been people who over the last few days have talked about the things, the lines that the U.S. and NATO will not cross so as not to trip into, accidentally, World War III, particularly a war between nuclear powers. Vladimir Putin mentioned his nuclear arsenal the other day in declaring the invasion of Ukraine, which surprised some people. And now he has done something in which he said, we're putting them on high alert.
Welcome to Daily Brief YouTube channel. Putin's decision to invade, which does not suit the 21st century, continues to receive reactions from the world. Russian troops bore down on Ukraine's capital Friday, with gunfire and explosions resonating ever closer to the government quarter, in an invasion of a democratic country that has fueled fears of wider war in Europe and triggered worldwide efforts to make Russia stop. With reports of hundreds of casualties from the warfare, including shelling that sliced through a Kyiv apartment building and pummeled bridges and schools, there also were growing signs that Vladimir Putin's Russia may be seeking to overthrow Ukraine's government. It would be his boldest effort yet to redraw the world map and revive Moscow's Cold War-era influence. While Europe and the North Atlantic Alliance put more diplomatic sanctions at the forefront yesterday, military options have started to be discussed today. Speaking after the NATO leaders' meeting, Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg announced that they will send more ammunition to Ukraine, including air defense systems that can shoot down Russian planes. According to the information shared by local sources, many military vehicles entered Ukraine from Poland. Military shipments from NATO to Ukraine are expected to continue by land, as Russian planes threaten Ukrainian airspace. However, this may change if strong air defense systems are installed in Ukraine. For now, the Ukrainian army is resisting Russia well, and this will make Putin's job more difficult with each passing day. It is noteworthy that the